I wish they would have just given the last slot to the PCS. That would have been just so much better. Hello and welcome to Vision Denial. My name is Sam and this is World Watch, the last one for a bit as we head off to the last one. If you're new here, I watch every single playoff of every region participating at Worlds, and yes, including that one, which, as we speak, that includes 338 games, not including the World's Qualifier Series. Today we're going to be rounding everything off from the August 27th to the September 10th, which is all of the remaining playoffs that we have left that are not the World's Qualifying Series, which will be the main topic of discussion coming in here. But we will also take a look at the draw stage that happened for play-ins and how close I believe this actually will be. For those of you who also will see, we'll take a review of all of those games if you want to see them as I launch them. Or as I launch at least the World Qualifying Series one, you'll see that in the link down below for everything. Without further ado, before we discuss anything else, and complaints, positives, all the rest, let's take a look at those games. And we're back with Southeast Asia's PCS lower bracket semifinal. We got ourselves Megabank Beyond Gaming versus CTBC Flying Oysters, the bank off. And congratulations to the Flying Oysters on being the 17th team to qualify for Worlds. Now, where was this Flying Oysters all playoffs long? Granted, Beyond Gaming, for some reason, looked like they no longer had the solid control they once had. There are great moments of how they clearly understand the map state way better and created the conditions that made ending games much easier to pull off, but not having control of every early game and mid game for 5 games in a row. And only being competitive in some late games is not a great look from Beyond Gaming. Now, the Flying Oysters, for their part, really cleaned up much of their act. Some very solid coordinations, understanding of their win conditions, ballooning leads nicely. Granted, in the areas of side lane control, closing out games, heck, even some drafting choices, as well as vision play, needs a lot of work. But, and it's really to a point where I can't say they are World's caliber, but I can see this team being a World's caliber team very easily. They have some time to clean it up. They're so close. My MVP for this series is Xiaoxi, who created so much space for his team to succeed. And we're back with Vietnam's VCS upper bracket semifinals. We got ourselves Team Secret versus GAM Esports. And congrats to GAM on being the 18th team to qualify for Worlds. Now, I think that both of these teams are World's caliber. There are awkward moments, but both teams understand their win conditions, rarely abandon the pace of the game for the sake of win conditions that prolong and give time for the team to scale and come back. Consistent vision play throughout, although slight edge to Team Secret for that. Incredible coordination, even bigger edge to GAM for that. My issues comes with the awkward approach to ending games. Neither team really buy into the need of using neutrals to end games, which, yes, finally, but also find themselves creating awkward skirmishes options to do so. Yes, it forces errors out, but it is also incredibly risky when doing so. It would not surprise me if Team Secret get the other slot and a chance at revenge or further down the line in the finals. And let's hope that GAM can make a better comeback at international competition. My MVP for this series is Slater, whose team fighting sense is absolutely nuts. And we're back with EMEA, or Europe's final playoff low bracket round 1. We got ourselves XL versus Fnatic. And there's something so serene to see two teams who plainly understand vision and map play do it slowly, but working to balloon the leads in that in a manner that's just not solely neutral fighting. It's a shame that we won't see excel at Worlds because this team had a lot of good play in them. Both teams, in fact, very similar. Solid vision play, good neutral awareness, ballooned leads incredibly, and knew how to approach macro choices properly. Both teams equally inconsistent as to how they gained their initial leads and with the coordination, and that's really a sticking point. While both struggle in those respects, Fnatic was just consistently better, especially with the coordination, even if by just a little bit it makes the difference. While Excel was just marginally better at creating neutral setups and angles of approach, on top of the map play, the lack of coordination is just really a bit of a contrast that really hurts the chances. Fnatic still holds the same kind of problems, but, we'll see if this gets resolved before the coming series. It's really unfortunate because both these teams are really good. My MVP for this series is Trimby, who was a non-stop setup machine creating space necessary for his teams to succeed. And we're back with Brazil's CBLOL lower bracket semifinals. We had ourselves Red Canids Kalunga versus Pain Gaming. What a lovely rivalry. And there is also something interesting about the moments of hesitation both teams have showed. For starters, right, Red was less hesitant in general across this series, but when Pain showed certainty, the coordination shone through in ways that were excellent to watch. Both teams have some excellent coordination, application of vision, understanding of their win conditions, and really focused approach to neutrals, sometimes to a detriment. And it's to a point where the map will often get completely ignored in a way that's a little bit bothersome, because both teams have shown solid application of map play and macro choices as well as side lane management. How both teams balloon leads is also a little inconsistent. Neither team really screamed Worlds caliber in general, but it's some small easy fixes that could get them to that point. I have doubts that Pain will pull off the rematch and qualify up against Loud, but mostly because the inconsistent proactivity and confidence is what really creates this doubt, but we'll see, right? My MVP of this series is Danquedo for the way he just navigated a lot of these skirmishes and team fights. Just excellent to see. And we're back with VCS's lower bracket round 3. We've got ourselves Saigon Buffaloes versus Team Wales, and quite honestly, if it wasn't for Coded, the Buffaloes would probably have a much easier time in this matchup. Because while both teams have excellent coordination, vision approach, and knew full well how to get their early leads and how to close out games when ballooned, it usually came down to how either side took advantage of the weaknesses from the other team. And frankly, it was always down to how rough is it going to get with Coded. Because between Artemis and Shogun in their matchup, or Blazes and Glory, they perform fantastically when given leads and actually are pretty competitive between each other. But Coded against Sparta was not it. And it's much worse when Coded didn't get anything at all. I think this series being as close as it is a testament to how the Buffaloes manage at all with Coded at all. And frankly, why I don't think that Team Wales will fare as any well against Team Secret. My MVP of the series is Bean J, who recognized very well how to get early leads that were necessary to succeed. And we're back with Europe's or EMEA's LEC's lower bracket round 2. We got ourselves Team BDS versus Fnatic. And congrats to Fnatic on being the 19th team to qualify for Worlds. It's like death and taxes. What the fuck? The casters often talked about the difficulty these teams had from their drafting choices. And while I think that much of what they said applies and it was really insightful from that perspective, the biggest issue that came down, or at least from my analysis, from how all 5 of these games, the teams that bet on their scaling options and played less proactive wound up having issues over time. less of a drafting choice and more of a proactive team choice. I will say that the stylistic differences in play for these teams were also nice to watch. Fnatic having a good sense of how to use the map, while BDS had a strong sense of neutral play. Both teams had solid vision and do understand their win conditions, just that the priority in some other aspects of their coordinations tend to hurt them in ways that I don't think they consider. BDS will have the chance to face off Golden Guardians for that last 20-second slot in their World Qualifier Series, and I believe that they're likely to get it if they clean up their play just a little bit and avoid some of their lackadaisical approaches to the game. My MVP for the series is Razork, whose early game play really nullified BDS and amplified Fnatic's win conditions in solid ways. And we're back with Vietnam's VCS lower bracket semifinals. We got ourselves a rematch. We got ourselves Team Secrets versus Team Wales. And congrats on Team Wales on being the 20th team to qualify for Worlds. This was the expectation before playoffs started, but as soon as they started, it became not what I expected. And lo and behold, it was an uphill battle for Team Wales up until this point. I noticed that for this series particularly, both teams had very similar approaches to drafting, ballooning leads, vision, and coordination. Either team moving forward with this series, I would have been okay with, honestly. The major difference between the two is that Team Secret was very map and macro oriented, while Team Wales was very neutral objective oriented. And since both teams had similar struggles on how to close out games without, relying on the neutral objectives, it always came down to that kind of a team fight for any given win. And honestly, many of these games were closer than I cared for, giving a little bit of concern about how Team Wales would balloon their leads that were garnered. I have my doubts as to how they'll do or fare against GAM, but this should be a solid team to contend with at Worlds. My MVP for the series is BJ for his aggressive play and approach at providing leads around the map. And we're back with the LEC upper bracket semifinals. We got ourselves Mad Lions versus G2 Esports. There was a lot more chaos involved here than expected. This series showed us a peak of creativity that no other team has shown so far, and in a positive aspect. Both teams really pushed the limits of their draft options, win conditions, opting to avoid the obvious pitfalls of their win conditions with excellent vision, while at times some dubious decision making involved. They had some solid coordination. But again, the inconsistencies worry me. G2 especially really focusing on how to leverage the map to move the game forward as opposed to just thinking about skirmishes and neutral plays to give just gives a whole breath of fresh air in terms of the types of team play that is involved. Both teams show some excellent Worlds caliber play. That said, again, there are concerns regarding a non-stop set of unforced errors from both sides. Now, while Mad is more universal with their mistakes, on the side of G2, Mickey X and Caps especially concern me for their micro choices and how inconsistent they are. We'll see if it improves over time before Worlds comes to life, but yeah. My MVP for the series is Broken Blade, whose influence around the map and in skirmishes caused a lot of chaos for Mad. And we're back with Southeast Asia's PCS Grand Finals. We got ourselves CTBC Flying Oysters versus Paris Saint-Germain Talons. And what an explosive set of matches out of these very different teams. Now, this region is sending in a strong set of representatives to Worlds. Both play around vision nicely, solid neutral setups, good understanding of their win conditions, minimal micro errors, incredible coordination. They know how to close out games. It's the whole package. Now, there isn't anything here that is super standout compared to the competition that is like on the upper echelon, but these two teams set the benchmark on how teams should approach play at Worlds. The you must be this tall to ride equivalent to Worlds caliber. My concern mostly comes from how these teams became a little bit more passive while behind in gold or in pressure, or how it was mostly a blue side victory, making the case of which team is stronger a little harder to achieve. But The Talons were cleaner, concise, and more organized in a way that the Oysters could not quite replicate with their scrappier approach to the game. My MVP for this particular series is Wacko for his incredible skirmishing power he brought to the table. And we're back with Vietnam's VCS's grand finals, and it's not a rematch. Weird. We got ourselves Team Wales versus GAM Esports. And these are some solid reps for the VCS. Although this was the expected results, most people expected GAM to win for the finals. The performance out of Team Wales is at its peak here, which is a good sign heading to Worlds. Both have fantastic vision, solid adaptation, great coordination, and solid neutral play, and close out games nicely. Both tunnel vision quite a bit while ignoring side lanes more than I cared for. The biggest difference between the two teams is twofold. First, the coordination from GAM is a different level from that of Team Wales. The on-the-fly reaction and preparation to shift their target selection is excellent, something that Team Wales struggled to pull off when a fight started bad for them. Second is the actual consistency in which their early game win conditions are met. GAM would find their win conditions met nearly all the time early, while mostly fumbling to follow through in mid to late game portions, which is to say that Team Wales at least excels in their ability to follow through with their leads once it's been established. Regardless, these are two teams that will likely make the VCS proud going into Worlds. My MVP for this series is Kaya, who, for the amount of pressure he applied during skirmishes and on the map, giving so much space for his team to succeed. And we're back with EMEA, or Europe's LEC's lower bracket semifinals. We got ourselves Mad Lions versus Fnatic. And what an explosive set of matches. Now, to be frank, most of these games were dictated by the execution that came from Fnatic. Both teams play with excellent vision, are solid while behind, adapt to drafts nicely, have incredible coordinations, but Fnatic is the team that was first to almost all plays. When Mad were being proactive, it was incredible to see, a bit more refined and calmly executed, but so often overshadowed by the bizarre micro choices that were had by their players. Fnatic, for their part, had execution fumbled more than they had micro choices that were questionable. So often would a play look great on paper, but come to the engage or the thick of the fight itself, some target selection would either be off, or the timing wrong, or even forget about a flank that was coming in, and then the lead would be just completely gone. Both teams are incredible. Just no doubt World's caliber with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder that don't necessarily make them favorites going into the tournament, but should make everyone very nervous. I also have no clue if Fnatic will beat G2 or the other way around. The chaos is palpable. My MVP for this series is Razork for his incredible early gameplay that really gut out all the options available to Mad. And we're back with Brazil CBLOL's grand finals and a rematch. We got ourselves Pain Gaming versus Loud. And congrats to Loud on being the 21st team to qualify for Worlds. And what a team to do it. Pain really did give it their all, really understanding the weakness that came from Loud. Neutral play. Because outside of that, Loud have incredible consistency with regards to vision, macro and side lane control, coordination and adaptation from game to game, also ballooning and closing out games incredibly well, sometimes in a way that surprised many, especially that last game. But if they don't get their early leads, it looks like a squad who's incredibly stubborn and doesn't quite know how to adapt on the fly, especially with their lack of ability to play around neutral objectives. A World's caliber team, for sure, but mostly from the clean execution. But we'll have to see how they fare against an early game team who has the same kind of map controlling juggernaut approach to it all, but also likes to play around neutral objectives. My MVP of the series is Robo for how much he contributed to the map play and the skirmishes that followed. And we're back with the LEC's grand final all the way from EMEA, or Europe. We got ourselves Fnatic versus G2. And, the level of play that G2 brings is outstanding. Now, Fnatic, for their part, bring the competition for sure, but this is something unheard of from the likes of G2. For starters, all right, both teams have solid adaptation, fantastic vision, good map play, incredible coordination, standout world caliber's team across the board from both sides on all accounts. Fnatic's play is significantly more consistent, and that makes me less worried when it comes to the international scene. They've only shown improvements, and the peak has yet to come from them. While G2, for their peak, it's jaw-dropping. But the level of from the level of proactivity and forethought that went into each of these drafts and games is insane. But it comes at the cost of such high volatile play. Nearly every player from G2 has shown some level of deep inconsistency that is worrisome, and even as a unit, the range of play is sort of baffling. But given the performance we have seen, if they find a way to stay at their peak consistently, we should have a contender for the World Championship title. My MVP for this series is Caps, who wound up being Claps the whole series long. Honestly, it's the most consistent I've seen him in years. And with it, the whole thought process I had as I was finishing off is that Worlds is going to be a lot of fun this year. There is quite a lot of excitement that comes with the whole package. The idea in which we are going to have a set of teams who, even from the lower, people know Detonation Focus Me. They're always a treat to have, so long as they don't choke. Movie Star, Rainbow Seven are as good as they've ever been. Loud is a consistent treat. The two Vietnamese teams, Team Wales and GAM, fantastic. Paris Saint-Germain Talons and the Flying Oysters are great. All of those teams, all 7 of those teams, excellent foundation for competition to really put a fire under the proverbial asses of the regular emerging or the regular legacy regions. And while I have some hesitations over some of the representatives for North America, and there are some concerns regarding some of the Korean teams as well as some of the European teams and their consistencies, those are still teams who have a level of impact that are quite solid overall. And there is clear favorites. We're not going to lie on the whole thing. Between JD Gaming, LNG, BLG, right, BDBD, as well as Gen G and T1, those 5 teams alone are hard to fit. Oh, and G2. Between, you got those 6 teams. You got G2, T1, Gen G, LNG, BDBD, and JD Gaming. Holy smokes. Those are some crazy, scary teams that are coming in. And those are really the ones that I think are going to be to watch overall. But in terms of the, how do we say, middle of the pack, they leave a good leverage in terms of what we should be setting our expectations between the two category, definite favorites and the up and comers that are going to be starting a fire. So honestly, I have nothing but positive experiences. The start of the playoffs were really shaky, and I was uncertain how that was going to look for Worlds, but the final result with the teams that we've gotten, great. Who are your favorites? I'd love to hear that in the comments down below. Who are your favorites? Who are your underdogs? Who do you think are going to create some surprises and chaos? I'm pretty sure G2 is always going to cause some chaos here. Which we need to then address the play-in stage, which honestly, going into the play-in event, we've got ourselves the 2 brackets, right? We got bracket A, bracket B. In bracket A, we got ourselves GAM, Loud, Paris Saint-Germain Talons, and Movie Star R7 or Rainbow 7. That particular one, I think, is going to be a test case for how Brazil and Latin America do against the juggernauts of Southeast Asia, because the Talons are crazy scary and GAM is also incredibly scary as a team, but this is also two teams who are at the peak of the competition for their regions. And so while it is an open and shut case in terms of the two teams we should be expecting to leave the bracket, i.e. it is GAM and the Talons who should be exiting this particular one. It is not there should be some leverage and opportunity to see at least some a type of upset to happen, especially, and this is not to put any shade on the situation, how Loud and GAM performed in MSI could posit something, I would say, dare I say, at least, the most likely upsetting competition. Because in round one, GAM and Loud are facing each other, and hopefully GAM doesn't choke like they did last time. Moving to bracket B, where we've got ourselves what I think is the scariest combo. Team Wales with whoever wins the World Qualifier Series, which is BDS or Golden Guardian. That one is a little bit... those two teams really, I think, we'll actually get a good sense of them once they get through the World Qualifying Series in and of itself. And then we got ourselves the Flying Oysters versus Detonation Focus Me, which, same thing. Detonation Focus Me was a little disappointing in MSI, but going into Worlds, they've refreshed and rebranded themselves, with Udapon now playing in the top lane and Milan in the bot lane coming in. This particular switch has reinvigorated a playstyle that is familiar and yet distinct from how most people remember Detonation. And I think that with Flying Oysters having the same kind of brawler, don't doubt me type of situation, these are honestly four matchups that have been originally picked for round one that I'm quite excited for. Looking at the way that this rolls out, it would not surprise me that whoever wins the World Qualifier Series and Detonation move forward, at least in terms of my prediction, move forward in terms of out of bracket B, which leaves that the four that I would expect out of this particular situation are facing off Paris Saint-Germain, GAM, Detonation, and the World Qualifier team. And of those four, it becomes very hard to really suss out who the last two teams are going to be going into the Swiss stage of it all. All in all, I think this play-ins will feature a more robust competitive environment than we've seen since, I believe it's 2018. 2018 was the really random year where things were super competitive across the board. So I'm excited to see that. But given the plans and how it is hard for us to tell a great picture of what's going to happen from there, because we don't know who the last team is in yet. So let's take a look at who we should be expecting in the World Qualifier. Yeah, World Qualifier Series, right? We've got ourselves Golden Guardians versus Team BDS. So it hasn't happened yet. It's not going to happen until October 9th, which the astute amongst everybody, and literally everybody, is that it's a day before Worlds. Which means that bracket B will be the day after, so on and so forth. Like the actual, there is a bad taste to be had, quite honestly, on the circumstance. And I've talked about this before, right? It would have been better to honestly either give it to North America or Europe from competition prior, so Europe would have had it, or to not continue to disrespect Southeast Asia. But that's been discussed beforehand in this channel. So let's take a look at the strengths and weaknesses of both of these teams. For starters, right? Let's go with the Golden Guardians, who's had the longest time to prep, wait, do the whole time and shebang and study up who they were going to be facing off in the LEC, off against their LEC 4th seed, who also had great number of time to prep and get ready in their own playoff series, and yet still somehow choked. There is an amount of inconsistent decisiveness, so they're mostly indecisive and yet sometimes show moments of glory, and that would have been appropriate for where they want to go. And it's not fair 100% for me to say that Golden Guardians are more likely to choke than anything else, but they are more likely to choke than anything else. The way I put it is that something had to change from the Golden Guardians if they wanted any confidence from anyone that they are world caliber. That had not changed at all, not from the first series that they played, not until the last one, which I believe they played 3 series. Yeah, the Golden Guardians versus Dig, they won that one. And then it was Golden Guardians versus Team Liquid. And the wording after that particular series was, especially since that series was really, they get massive leads, but as they balloon, they don't close out their games unless there's a mistake. And I think that's the biggest thing here, because when we look to Team BDS, who, of the 4 teams moving forward, this was the cleanest. I hesitate to say that. It was the more consistent one, I would say, because as BDS finished off against Fnatic, being their last series, I'm going to just, BDS versus Fnatic, here we go, as I have my notes here. BDS have strong neutral play. They are on a regular basis on par with all the rest of the teams. Are incredibly proactive, understand their win conditions. They are very minute stylistic difference from the rest of Europe or EMEA. I personally think that BDS, all in all, is the more consistent and, quite frankly, more likely team to win. It would not shock me if October 10th, whatever, or 9th, depending on the time zone you live in, because it could be like 9 p.m. West Coast North America, and you'd be doing it, so it'd be the 8th on there. So October 9th for most other places. If you are like, all right, we're going to watch this until 2 a.m., and then nothing happens. It's 3 games. Barely 3 hours goes by because this team barely is able to gain a lead, and when they gain a lead, they don't do anything with it until a mistake is forced, versus this team whose proactivity and consistency is only outdone by the fact that they don't play the map, which this team doesn't do. Any weaknesses that Golden Guardians needs to play for, they don't do, and haven't been able to do ever. And it is a disappointing matchup to be had. There would have been an excitement if all 4 North American teams had some zhuzh to them, but they do not. And the unfortunate situation is that while Golden Guardians were hyped going into the playoffs, the current state of affairs as they are is not great. But the caveat here is that there is a historical precedence of 2 things. Golden Guardians outperforming in international tournaments. They do on a regular basis. 2, North America having a weird kryptonite when it comes to their lower seeds being better than the European lower seeds, EMEA, or the European lower seeds. Which, historical precedence versus most recency is not always the best caveat, but it isn't something to be completely ignored. I'm currently collecting the data and numbers from this, of which once all of that's prepared, I will be putting in a more focused breakdown of the situation. For the moment in time being, in terms of what I'm collecting in numbers from the notes that I've had and the reviews of everything, the only thing that I could really posture is that if Golden Guardians over the time have managed to really shape up and clean up their act, maybe. Because the regular season play was, frankly, pretty solid. It's their playoff games, however, their best of 5 performance, which is what this will be evaluating on, not so much. Well, BDS has had fairly consistency in their regular season and a much better show in their best of 5s all year. This is a team from the start that has been world's caliber. This is a team that's been struggling to even attempt it. But those are my thoughts. Do you think that somehow North America will get their 4th slot here, and then it'll be an upset and a change in dynamics of what we should be expecting out of the 2 regions? Or no, it'll be as business as usual, and we'll have good old Team BDS as the last seed? Any of your thoughts will be appreciated in the comments down below. But I also have to mention the elephant in the room, which is, why is the World's Qualifier the day before? This is honestly, as just a wrap up of my thoughts on the situation, is that you're going to have 2 teams of which have to get visas and preparation and stay for the duration of Worlds, and one of them is going to be gone before the whole thing starts. A whole 24 hours before the thing starts. Is that not a serious fuck you to these teams? No? Is that just me? Because that feels really whack. Why? Why was this the case? Who opted into thinking that this would be a good idea? Because, quite frankly, I hesitate to even think that they even thought about what they were doing with this series. And I've talked about it, right? The problems of the logistics and everything. It is, the feeling of it all is just wrong. It felt like this was a bad idea from the start. It shouldn't have happened. And whether or not the last seed should have gone to any of the regions, whichever it is, this specific idea for resolving the last seed at Worlds is not good. And frankly, Riot, I don't know if anybody from Riot watches this. If you do, please. Better organization. Pick 2 regions who have, quite honestly, much closer in date, closer in date playoffs. Anything. The way that this was done is not okay. Heck, if it was 2 smaller regions who finish early, because most of them finished very early for a Riot, a 2nd seed for their region, that would turn out in numbers, in droves, for whatever the region is. I just don't think this was a great idea. But with it, I will be letting it off. I want to hear everything that you guys have to say in the comments down below. I appreciate also everybody who have watched everything. I want to know, which was your favorite series? So far, my favorite series was, quite honestly, the G2 versus MAD in the upper bracket semifinals. That one showed a breadth of creativity in terms of the drafting that you could do, as well as some of the chaos that can come with it, even if some aspects of it weren't great. But I'd love to hear which ones were your favorites in the breadth of the crazy games that had happened. So many good series, so many really bad series too, but overall a positive experience. In the coming weeks, I am working on a set of videos, the same Meet the Teams, as well as one hopefully that I can get done, but I will not promise, I will promise that the Meet the Teams videos will get done as per usual, like I have done in every other tournament that I've done in this channel. I appreciate the journey that some of you have followed me in, as well as some of you who have followed me on TikTok for that. It's greatly loved. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful day. And I'll see you next time in the coming weeks.